Module 1, Phonological Awareness, Video 1, Introduction to Phonological Awareness. Video 1 goals. We're going to define the terms phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. We'll explore the subsets of phonological awareness. We'll understand the role of phonological awareness in reading. And we'll identify key vocabulary used when teaching phonological awareness. So what is phonological awareness? Phonological awareness is an umbrella term that includes identifying and manipulating parts of spoken language. Now, there are a range of skills, beginning with skills that are a little bit more simplistic, up through skills that are more complex. So we begin with word awareness, move on to rhyming and alliteration, syllable awareness, onset rhyme awareness, and then phoneme awareness. On the next slide, we're going to get into more specific examples of these by looking at a graphic. Now in this slide, we see that phonological awareness is in fact an umbrella term, and then all the different subsets of phonological awareness are underneath as the raindrops here. So we're going to just go through and talk about each of the subsets of phonological awareness. And they begin over here with the most simplistic and then work their way up to the most complex over here. So we'll start here with word awareness. Now in word awareness, we're asking students to be able to listen to a sentence and break it up into individual words. So this is something you might be doing in preschool, maybe early kindergarten. So you would ask a student to identify and count how many words in the sentence. So if they can hear the sun is hot, they can hear it's 4 different separate words. The sun is hot. And that would be word awareness. Then we move on to rhyme awareness and alliteration. So let's talk about rhyme awareness first. So when we talk about the rhyme, we're talking about the vowel and what comes after. So in sun, the rhyme would be un, and in bun, the rhyme also is un. So we would say that these words rhyme, sun and bun, because they have the same rhyme unit. Now when we talk about alliteration, we're talking about the same initial sound or the same beginning sound. So funny friend, they both start with f, funny friend. So that would be an example of alliteration because they both have the same beginning sound. Now this would again be a skill that kids are working on in preschool and in kindergarten. Then we move on to syllable awareness. Now this is the first time we're really asking kids to break words apart into their syllables. And we start with compound words just because it's easier for students to actually hear those words. Cow and boy, they can hear that those are individual words, and when we put it together, it's cowboy. So it's much easier to start with compound words because they're easier to take apart. Then we would progress to words that are 2 syllables that are not compound words. For instance, planet. Plan would be the first syllable and it would be the second syllable. And then we're going to move on to the onset rhyme awareness. So the onset of a word is just that beginning sound. So in the word back, b is the onset. And then as we said before, the rhyme unit would be the ak part. It's the vowel and what comes after it. So b, ak. The onset is b and ak is the rhyme. So the students would break the word into the onset and the rhyme. Sometimes the onset might be a blend or a digraph. We'll get into some of those terms a little bit later, but T and R together say tr, so that would be the onset. And then AIN says ain, and that would be the rhyme. So if a student were asked to break up train into the onset and rhyme, it would be tr, ain. And this is the first time at this level where the students are taking a 1-syllable word and starting to break it apart. And that gets them ready for what they're going to be doing next, which is phoneme awareness. And this is the most complex of all the phonological awareness skills. And typically the phoneme awareness part is where many kids end up struggling and having some difficulty. So let's talk a little bit about the phoneme awareness. So in phoneme awareness, we're taking a word and we're breaking it down into its individual sounds or phonemes. So a phoneme is simply the smallest unit of sound. So cat can be broken up into 3 phonemes or sounds. K, at, and that would be an example of phoneme awareness. So as we said in the previous slide, phonemic awareness would be the most complex phonological awareness skill. And this is a skill that is critical to the reading process and also a skill where many kids stumble. So we will be spending a lot of time talking about phonemic awareness. So as we said, it's a subset of phonological awareness, and it just refers to the ability of students to be able to first hear and identify the individual sounds and phonemes. So for instance, clap, can they break it apart into those individual phonemes or sounds? K, l, ap. And that would be a little bit more difficult than, say, a word like cat that only had 3 phonemes. But then we can't stop there. We have to go beyond just segmenting. So phonemic awareness skills have a range of difficulty, and we need to teach students to the most advanced levels of phonemic awareness. So we would begin by segmenting, as I showed you, taking clap, k, l, ap, that would be segmenting. Then deleting a phoneme. Say clap again, but don't say ul, and we get cap. Or substituting a phoneme, say clap, change k to f, and we get flap. So those would be some examples. On the next slide, we're going to really dive into it and talk about the range of difficulty in phonemic awareness. So now on this slide, we're going to dive into the progression of skills when we're focusing on phonemic awareness. Now we're going to begin with more basic skills, and then we're going to work our way up all the way to those more complex skills. So let's begin with isolating. So when we first work with phonemic awareness with students, we simply want them to isolate the sounds or just be able to identify what's the initial sound or the medial sound or the final sound in the word. So for instance, if you say to the student, what's the first sound you hear in cat? Can they tell you k? Or what's the medial sound? And they tell you ah. Or you ask them, what's the final sound? And they tell you t. So that would just be isolating the sound. Then we move on to blending phonemes. So this is where you're going to give the students the individual phonemes, and then the student will blend it. So you might say to the student, what word am I saying? And then you pause between each phoneme, k, a, t, and then the student has to blend it together and tell you cat. So that's blending. Then we would have segmenting. So when we're segmenting, we're giving the student the words, and then we're asking the student to segment that word into the individual phonemes or speech sounds. So if I said to the student, what sounds do you hear in cat? Can the student tell me k, at, and break it apart? Then we would move on to adding a phoneme. So you may give the student a rhyme and ask the student to add a beginning sound. So you might say at, and then the student repeats at. And then you ask them, add k to the beginning, and what do you get? And the student tells you cat. Then we have an example of deleting a phoneme. This is where we're taking a phoneme away. So for instance, we might begin with something like cat. Say cat again, but don't say k, and what's left? At. So when you only have 3 phonemes, it's a little bit easier. We can make it more complex by adding another phoneme. So now we have 4 sounds. Say stop. Say stop again, but don't say s, and you get top. Then we move on to the most complex, which would be substituting. We're asking students to change out a sound or a phoneme to make a new word. So for instance, say cat, change ka to and you get mat. And then again, we can make it more complex by adding another sound. So now we have 4 sounds. Say stop, change t to ul, and we get slop. And then we could make it even more complicated by having the student change out the second to last phoneme in a final blend, in an ending blend instead of an initial blend. And then it gets even more complicated. Now in a later video, we will be getting into the nitty-gritty of this, of how you teach this to students, and again, going through all of these skills again, because this is complex and it takes some time to really understand it. So why teach phonemic awareness to all students? Often we'll teach phonemic awareness to students who might be struggling or maybe receiving special education services or have been identified, but why not teach it to all students? We really should be, according to the research. And before I delve into this, I want to just show you, I've cited Kilpatrick 2016 here. This is David Kilpatrick's book, Equipped for Reading Success, that really breaks it all down, explains phonemic awareness, explains early reading, and provides a phonemic awareness training program. So I just want to reference that and really recommend you that if you're going to be working with kids with phonemic awareness, recommend that this book is really a great resource and will save you a lot of time. You won't have to recreate the wheel. Everything that you need is really in there. And so all of the evidence that I'm citing here is from Kilpatrick's book. He's really synthesized all of the reading research and has written a great book that just explains it in a practical way so teachers can take that information and then use it to help their students. So let's dive in. So according to the research, weak phonemic awareness is the most common cause of poor reading. So if we know weak phonemic awareness is going to cause poor reading, then it makes sense that we should be giving phonemic awareness activities to all students to strengthen their phonemic awareness because it is such an important part of the reading process. Now the next box here really explains why it's so important. Phonemic awareness promotes something called orthographic mapping. And what orthographic mapping is, it's the mental process we use to store words for immediate and effortless retrieval. So in other words, when we first see a word and we've never seen it before, it's an unknown word. Once we've seen it, as long as we have strong phonemic awareness, we can really map those sounds and those letters so that when we see that word after a few times, it becomes immediate. We don't have to think about it, it's effortless. That's orthographic mapping. So if a student has weak phonemic awareness, they're unable to have that orthographic mapping process take place. So now, in light of the fact that we now know that phonemic awareness is very important to the orthographic mapping process, and we know that good readers can read words effortlessly without thinking about it. If we look at the next box, and it shows that the researchers estimate that between 30 and 40% of students won't fully develop that phonemic awareness unless it's explicitly taught. That's a very large percentage. So if we think about the implications of that, if we don't explicitly teach phonemic awareness to students, we're going to have a lot of students struggle with reading. And so it's extremely important that all students in the primary grades, in first grade, second grade, some students maybe even in third grade, depending on the student, continue to receive that phonemic awareness to the most advanced level. The good news is that studies also show that early training of phonological awareness skills in kindergarten and first grade can actually prevent many reading difficulties from happening in the first place. So this is really a preventative measure. If we do it early on and often, we can actually prevent those reading problems from happening. And then of course for students who didn't have that early training, we can still remediate that. I still see students who come to me in fourth grade or fifth grade with weak phonological awareness. Most specifically, actually, phonemic awareness, that subcategory, that tends to be the place where they're really struggling. And once remediated, they can catch up. But we do know that it is harder to catch up the later the intervention, which is why we really want to make sure all kids are getting that phonemic awareness training early on in school. So the last slide I have here are just some key terms. They're terms that we've talked about throughout the video and we'll be talking about in future videos. So take a minute and look through these again. I go over the term for phonological awareness, what a phoneme is, what phoneme awareness is, also known as phonemic awareness, what the rhyme unit is, what the onset is, what a syllable is, and also what alliteration is. So you can go back to this and refer back to it because these are terms that will just take a lot of reinforcement and practice before they really become something that you feel very comfortable with. So it's here for you to go back to whenever you want. In future videos, we're going to be diving into these terms, and in the next video, we're really going to be taking a look at teaching students phonological awareness, and more specifically phonemic awareness, and using manipulatives, so you'll really be able to see what phonemic awareness looks like in action.